Okay, so we're going to get started with the Daf Yomi on the bottom of Mem Daled on the base 44b, 4 lines from the bottom. So we start with the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Shor Shul Yotze Lisakel. Let's say you have an ox that's being brought out to be stoned. And while it's being brought out to be stoned, the owners of the ox consecrate the ox. And under those circumstances, Eino Muktash. Under those circumstances, we're going to say the ox itself is not consecrated. Because since the ox has already been adjudicated to be stoned, you're not allowed to have benefit from it. You can't consecrate at that point. Shachto, at that point, if you slaughtered it, Pisaro Aser, the meat is prohibited. Again, the ox has already been sentenced to death, so therefore you can't get any benefit from it. But let's say before the ox was sentenced to death, you consecrated it. Then under those circumstances, we're going to say Bava Muktash, that the owner, that we're going to say under those circumstances, the Vim Achel Nigmar Dino Tisho Bava Muktash. If the owner consecrated it before it was actually sentenced to death, then it's consecrated. And at that point also, Vim Shachto Besaro Mutter. If you slaughtered it, its meat is permitted. So now there's a second part to this Mishnah, which Rashi tells us is completely unconnected to the first part. Rashi says here, this is a totally different matter. So now, let's just review. We have the laws of the four watchmen, the four guardians. Did you learn about that in school, Daniel? Did they ever teach you about the four watchers, the four watchmen? Did they ever teach you guys that in Berman? They never taught you that. Okay. So this is something which, yeah, so there's four shomrim. There's the four guardians. There's the shomer chinam, the shomer sachar, note star, which is the socher, and then there's the shoel. So there's the shoel is the borrower, and the shomer chinam is the one who's watching for free. These are very, very important categories because they come up a lot of times. So the one who's watching for free is, as a general rule, we're going to say exempt from, we're going to say as a general rule, is exempt from damages unless he is negligent. But he's exempt for theft. What? We just did this. He's exempt for theft and loss, but he's liable for negligence. The borrower is always liable. The borrower is always liable, except there's a couple of cases where he has exemption when if he's using it with the owner itself. Then there's the person who's renting. So the person who's being paid to watch it, and there that person is going to be liable for theft, but he's exempt for an accident. And then there is the person who's renting it. So there's a question of how do we view that person's status, the one who's the renter. So the one who's paying money to use it. So do we view him as the shomer sachar? Do we view him as there's a whole question of how we view that person, but that's going to be part of relevance. So anyway, we say here, masro shomer chinam or shol nos sachar or sochar. Let's say you give it to one of these categories. Nichnasu tachas habalim. Then we're going to say that these takes the place of the owner, and so therefore, if he's a muad, if it's a muad, mashayim nezik shoim. If he's a muad, if the ox is a muad, the owner pays full damages. The tam, and if it's a tam, mashayim chatzi nezik. If it's a tam, he pays half damages. Okay, so then the Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan, shor shehemis. Let's say there was an ox. We're going to the bride, so it's an ox that killed somebody. Achel nigmar dino. Before the case is declared settled, macharo, before the case is settled, he sold it. So there was an ox that killed somebody. Reuben's ox killed somebody, and he knows Shimon's going to court, but he says, you know what, I can get a good deal for him fast because I know how this case is going. Is it a good sale? Yes, it's a good sale. Iktisho, if he consecrates, we're on top of Mem Ham and Alf, if he consecrates it to the temple, it's consecrated. Shachato, if he slaughters it, Pesaro Mutar, because under all these cases, it's not yet adjudicated. It's just potential litigation or potential criminal liability. Let's say he returns it back to the original owner, Mukhsar. He could say, listen, you let me an ox, I returned it to you. Or you told me to watch your ox, I returned it to you. And even though the court is eventually going to take it back from the person he returned it to, he could say, you lent me an ox, or you gave me an ox, I returned to a perfectly good ox, even though it's not really perfectly good, but that's his argument. So Mishanig Mardino, but once the case is been established in the court and the court has given its verdict, Macharo Eino Machor, you can't sell it, it's not a valid sale. Tisho Eino Mukdash, you can't consecrate it. Shachto Besaro, Asur. If he slaughters the meat, it's prohibited. Zero Shomer Beis Balav Eino Mochsar. But and if he returns at that point, it's not going to be a valid return. Rabbi Yaakov says, Av Mishanig Mardino. Rabbi Yaakov says, even once the case was adjudicated in the court, Zero Shomer Balav Mochsar. Rabbi Yaakov says, also once the case was adjudicated in the court, if the guardian returned it to its owner, it's going to be considered returned. What's the reason? Because he could say, here it is, it's in front of you, which is a little bit of a strange logic because I'm giving you back something that's worthless, but that's what he's able to say. So what's the dispute between the rabbis and Rabbi Yaakov? So maybe this is the argument. The Rabban and Sabri, the rabbis say, well, since it's prohibited to have benefit from it, you can't say, here it is in front of you. The rabbis say, well, since it's prohibited to have benefit, they can't say, well, here it is, go and take it. Whereas Rabbi Yaakov says, no, even though it's Isurei Anah, technically speaking, he's returning it, even though it's the guy can't have any benefit from it. So the Gemara says, no, that's not the argument. It says Rabba, Kuliyama, everybody says, everybody says that by Isurei Anah, or something's prohibited to have benefit, you could say, here it is in front of you. The aim came because if you're going to say they don't say that, because we have and we don't draw this distinction by chametz on Pesach, because by chametz on Pesach, let's say a person borrows some chametz before Pesach, and then he has it over Pesach and he returns it to the guy. So if a Jew owns chametz on Pesach, it makes it prohibited after Pesach. But still, we say that he's allowed to return it to him. But why? It's Yisrael and us. So we see, even though it's a prohibitive benefit from it, he's still allowed to say, here it is in front of you. So from the fact that everybody agrees to that, so here too, everybody agrees that by the ox, even though now it's sentenced to death, you could still return it. But so what's the difference here? So here the argument is, and this is very sensitive, but can you adjudicate the case of the ox if the ox is not present? Now, the defendant has a right to be present, but does the ox have a right to be present? That's the case here. So we say, do we adjudicate the case of the ox without the ox being present? The Rabbanan suffering, no. The rabbis say you can't. You only look at the case of the ox if the ox will be there. The Amrway, because he could say to him, so he could say, I have the right to have my ox, to bring my ox to the court, because if you had given the ox to me, I could have given my ox and told it to run away. But now you put my ox into the hands of somebody who's not able, who I have no argument against. And so therefore, I had the right I should have had the ox in my possession before it went to court. Because his reasoning is, let me just finish this sentence, I'll go back to that. Rabbi Yaakov suffer Gomer Dino Shal Shor Shal B'Fanav. Rabbi Yaakov says you could complete the ox you could argue the case even without the ox not being there. The Amrulay sof migmar avig Amrulay ladina, because in the end he was going to go to court anyway. So therefore, he says I could have made this argument even without the ox being there. So Gemara says, okay, my time in Rabbanan. What's the reason why the rabbis are of the position that the ox needs to be there, or else the court can adjudicate the case? It's based upon a verse. Ashur Yisrael the ox will be stoned, and also the owner should be put to death. The ox is adjudicated in the same way that the owner is, that a person who kills is adjudicated. Just like the owner a person needs to be there if he goes before a court. I'm sure before enough. Also an ox. Whereas Rabbi Yaakov says, Bisham and Balam b'nei tainunenu el ashur bar tana. So he says, okay, makes sense. A person, he can make a claim. That's why he should be there, so he can make a claim. But the ox can't make any claims. So according to the Gemara's conclusion, it seems to be that the reason why the rabbis say the ox needs to be there is because it has to be judged just like a regular person is judged. And a regular person is judged, he has to be there. Whereas an ox, and so therefore the ox should have to be there. Like formally speaking, this is how a legal case goes on. The parties need to be present. But Rabbi Yehuda says, no, the reason behind the parties being present is so that they can make a claim. In this case, they can't make a claim. This seems to be a little bit of a development from the first approach of the Gemara, that they're saying that it was logical. The rabbis say, no, if I had this ox in my possession, I could have manipulated the situation to my advantage. I didn't have to hand it over to the court. They could have made something like that. So basically, when you have something in your possession, you have a stronger claim, even if the law is exactly the same than somebody who doesn't have something in his possession. So that's basically their argument. If you had given it back to me, I would have had a stronger claim. And so therefore, that's kind of their argument. You had a question, Daniel? Oh, you had a question, Harold.
Does the owner have to be present? What if the owner is interested?
For what question? For the court case, you're saying? We assume that the owner will be present, but if he's not there, he must have appointed a guardian or something, or the court stands in his favor. I don't know exactly the details there, but it's a very good question. So there's a similar case that happened. There was a yeshiva that said you're not allowed to have a cell phone. So then somebody lent his cell phone. He had his cell phone. He's breaking the laws. He lent his cell phone to a different kid. Then the school, they found the phone lying in the kid's dorm room. So they took the phone and they said, we're going to give it back. The guy who borrowed it said, it's not mine. He said, okay, tell the person whose phone it is to come and claim it, and we'll punish him, but we'll give him back his phone. So the guy whose phone it was said to the kid who I borrowed his phone, you owe me a new phone. Said, why? They took the phone. Said, yeah, but it was in my possession, I would have had it. So then they argue. So it's a similar case. That's what they said. This Gemara. That was from the Cheshukei Chemed. So now we say the following case: Masur Shomer Chinam v'Shoel. Let's say he gave it to the Shomer Chinam and the Shoel. Then we're going to say that they stand in place of the original owner. These watchmen stand in place of the original owner. Tanu Rabbanan Arba Nichnasu Tachas Habalam. These are the ones who stay in the place of the original owner. Who are these ones who stand in this place of the original owner? Shomer Chinam, the guy watches for free. The borrower, the Shoel, the Nosei Sachar, the Nosei Sachar is the one who is basically being paid to watch it. The Socharan is the renter. And so therefore, under all these circumstances, Hargu Tamin, Neragin, that if the ox kills while it's a tam, then the ox is killed, and they don't pay the ransom because it's a kofar muad. And if the ox kills while it's a muad, neharagin, then the ox is put to death and mishalman as a kofar, and they have to pay the ransom. And in all these cases, they have to pay back the owner of the ox, chutz mishomer chinam, with the exception of the shomer chinam, the guy who borrowed, the guy watched it as a favor. He watched it for free. So we have this case This is the brisa. So the Gemara says, Amri Hechidami, what's the scenario of the brisa? Idenatre, if you're guarding it, if they guard it properly, then I feel cool and nami lift through. Then all of them, mean to say, if they did a proper guarding, then everybody should be exempt. I feel cool and nami lift through. The Idolonatre, but if they didn't guard it, I feel it's shomer chinam nechayev. And even the person who watched it for nothing should be responsible because he was negligent. So what's a scenario where the shomer chinam is not responsible to pay them back, but every other person is? So the Gemara says, they watched it, but they did a lesser watching. They did a normal watching, but they didn't do an enhanced watching. What's a normal watching? They tied it up, they closed the door, but they didn't really hire a security guard. They didn't do an enhanced watching. So Gemara says, Shomer Chinam, the Shomer Chinam, he doesn't have to pay back under these circumstances because he did a Shmira Pechuta, he did a sufficient guarding. But Hanach, but these others, Lo Kalas Shmirasan. We're going to say these other cases, their Shmira is not finished, and so therefore they're going to be responsible. So the Gemara says, wait. Let's connect this to another dispute. Who is this position of the Mishnah like? Amri Kaman, who is it like? Ika Rabbi Meir. We have Rabbi Meir who said, he was going to say in the Mishnah on actually Amma Beis, Rabbi Meir is going to say that a muad requires shmira pechuta. According to Rabbi Meir, a muad requires, ironically, not as much of a watching, and so therefore you pay the kofar. It says you pay kofar under these circumstances. It says that under this case, if it would be a muad, you would pay the kofar. Rabbi Meir, the Amar on top of 45b. Rabbi Meir is in a position that the socher, that the one who rents it, is like the shomer chinam dummy. If it goes according to Rabbi Meir, who says the socher is like the shomer chinam dummy, listening chutz mi shomer chinam v'asocher, it should include the shomer chinam and the socher. That's what Rabbi Meir says about Mitzia. That's how he holds it. Ik Rabbi Huda, the Amar no say sachar, the Amar socher can no say sachar, that the renter is like the one who's being paid to watch it. Nisni chutz mi shomer chinam. It should say, with the exception of shomer chinam, but at the same time, it should say v'kulan b'muadin peturu inyan kofar. But and all of them, with respect to the muad, are going to be exempt with respect to the kofar, because Rabbi Yehuda is of the position that by a muad you only need shmira pechuta. You only need the lesser watching. That so how do we basically by Bava Kamma, if as relates to Bava Kamma, Rabbi Meir says that the shomer chinam is like the socher, and by Bava Kamma, Rabbi Yehuda is the only one who's saying that the muad only requires a shmira pechuta. So how do you combine these two positions? So the Gemara says, so the Rabbi Yehuda damar socher knol v'tzachar damar nisni chutz mishomer chinam v'kol muadim p'torin linyan kofar. So how do we combine the two positions? So Amar Avuna Bar Chanina, he says, who is the author of this Mishnah? Mani Rabbi Eliezer. Author of this Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer, says, "Ein shmira ela sakin." He says that the only way that you could have so Rabbi Meir says that there's no way you could really watch a muad animal or a tam animal. The only way you can watch it is when it's dead. And so therefore, Inyan Socher, and with respect to a renter, Savak Rabbi Yehuda, he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, who says, Socher can also say schar dami, that the renter is not like the one who's paid. And so therefore, he's going to say that he wasn't completely negligent. He holds like Rabbi Meir with respect to that. He holds like Rabbi Yehuda with respect to that, but he holds like Rabbi Eliezer with respect to the Bava Kamma issue. Abai says no. Olam Rabbi Meir. It's like Rabbi Meir. The Machav Rabbi Baravu Avatani Sochar Ketzim Mishalim. That Rabbi Meir is the one that says Kishomer Sachar. Rabbi Yehuda says Kishomer Chinam. So he switches the position of Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. So now we have the next case. Amar Belazar Masar Shoro Shomer Chinam. Let's say he gave his ox to a Shomer Chinam to watch. So somebody's watching it for free. Hizik, and then it does damage. Chayev, he's responsible. Huzak, if the animal is damaged, potter, then the Shomer Chinam is exempt. Gemara says, I don't understand this case. If he accepted upon himself to watch it for its damage, then even if it's damaged, it should be liable. If he didn't accept anything upon himself with damage, he should be exempt. So Rava says, he accepted upon himself to guard it from damage, but only halfway. Could go into Hikir Boshu Nakhan. He recognized that the ox was a goring ox. And as a basic point, he knew that this ox wouldn't go and damage others. So Kiboe, and so that he accepted upon himself the Kiboe. That he accepted upon himself that the ox would not damage others. So if the ox damage others, he's responsible. That he accepted upon himself. But he didn't accept upon himself that no ox would ever damage him. So that's the distinction. Okay. Now we have the next Mishnah. Kasharo Balav b'Mosera. Let's say the owner tied it up with a rope, b'nal b'fan of Karoi, and he closed the door in front of him. V'yatza v'hizik, and then the ox goes out and does damage. That's what's called a shmira pachuta. That's not an enhanced watching, that's a regular watching. So then Rameir says you're always responsible if you just do a minimal guarding. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, this is the ironic position of Rabbi Yehuda. It seems illogical at first glance. Tam chayev umuad pater. Rabbi Yehuda says that the tam is. Have a good day, Daniel. Bring some nuance to the discussion today at your Model UN. So Rabbi Yehuda says tam chayev umuad pater. Rabbi Yehuda says the tam is under these circumstances where there's a shemira pachuta, the tam will be liable, but the muad will be exempt, as it says, v'lo yishmerenu balav. As it says, when are you responsible for the muad? If it's not watched, v'shamar huzeh, and this one is watched. So Rabbi Yehuda has the ironic position that the muad is not responsible you're not responsible for muad if it does a shemira pachuta, whereas for a tam you are, which is counterintuitive. Whereas Rabbi Eliezer says, Eno Shmir al Rabbi Eliezer says, we don't care how you watched it, it's not sufficient. And you're always going to be responsible for the time in the Moed. So the Gemara says, my time at the Rabbi Meir. Why does Rabbi Meir say that if you do a Shmir Pachuta, you're not going to be responsible by the time in the Moed? Because Kosavar, he says, Stam Shvaram Rav B'chazka Shimur Kami. He says, most oxen are not considered watched. And the Torah says we should be responsible from the tam. Then in Baile Shmira Pachuta, because we should require a Shmira Pachuta, a minimal guarding. And then the Torah says that by a muad, then in Baile Shmira Muad, and that we would have thought that the muad requires an enhanced watching. And then we compare the goring of the tam to the goring of the muad to say that you're not responsible for the muad or the tam if you have a shmira pachuta. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, stam shvarim b'chaska shimur kami. Most oxen are considered to be guarded. And Amar Achman tam nesham, the Torah says, paid for the tam, then you buy away shmira muad. We should require enhanced watching. Hadar Amar Achman v'lo yishmernu gabi muad, denavele shmira muad. But then the Torah says the same thing by the muad, but that's called a riboy achar riboy. That's one addition after another addition, and we have a principle in riboy achar riboy elamayit. So the Torah is telling us that the muad does not require the enhanced watching, only the tam. Hadar Amar Achmana, and then the Torah comes along and says, and if you want to say, well, just like it says, goring by tam and by muad, so the Torah is a specific verse to say that the muad, you're not responsible if you had a shmira mu'ula, but the tam you are responsible. For the muad, you're not responsible if you had a shmira pakuta, but by the tam you are. And that's the strange position of Rabbi Yehuda. So we could just say it's a verse, or we could say, like the Meiri says, that by the Muad, there's the expectation, since it's so dangerous, that it's a shared responsibility. Gemara says, but don't we need this verse? To teach us in general the prohibition that you're not allowed to leave your animal to do dangerous things. The Gemara says, Im mean to say that it's specifically the muad is not liable if there was a shmira pechuta. Tanya, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov taught, Echatam v'chamuat sheshamru shmira pechuta pater. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov said, if you as long as you do the shmira pechuta, you're going to be exempt. That's like the position of Rabbi Meir. My time. Like Rabbi Yehuda damar muad b'shmira pechuta sagile. He holds like Rabbi Yehuda, who says that the muad requires just a minimal watching. And he compares the tam to the muad. Okay, so the Gemara says, Amar Rav Ada will pater Rabbi Yehuda el tzad ada shabo tzad tamos b'mkom omed. So this is another position. It says Rav Ada bar Ava, and when Rabbi Yehuda says that the muad is exempt if there was a shmira pechuta, there's two parts to the muad. There's the half that was the tam, and now it's the new half that he has to pay from it being a muad. So he's only exempting the second half of it as a muad, but he still has to pay the initial statement, the initial part of it being a tam, even though there was a shmira pechuta. Amarav muad l'karen yamin ain't a muad l'karen small. Let's say he's a muad to the right side. That doesn't mean he's a muad to the left side. Tosfos asks the question: well, what if he's a muad to the left? Doesn't mean he's automatically a muad to the right. But basically, do we assume that the oxen are righties? So the Gemara says, "Aliba the man, Aliba the Rabbi Meir." According to Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Meir says we always require a shmira me'ula, both by the tam and the muad. So therefore, since that's the case, according to Rabbi Meir, we say both by the tam and the muad, we require an excellent watching, and so therefore you would automatically be a muad for both. You'd have to do the same watching on both. Why does Rameir say? So meaning to say, Rameir says whether it's a tam or whether it's a muad, you require shmira mu'ula. And Rav says there's a distinction between the shmiras of a tam and a muad. But the Rabbi Yehuda, my area Karen small, I feel Karen yamin. Nami is beitzad tamas is beitzad muedes. Why does he say only by the Karen of the small? Even by the yamin, there's a tzad tamas and a tzad muedes. So Gemara says no. Olam Rabbi Yehuda. It's like Rabbi Yehuda. Well, it's really like Rav Ada bar Ada, and he doesn't hold like Rav Ada bar Ava, and this is what he says. Ki agavna hu de mishkachas beitzad tamas and muedes. In this case, we can have it to have a tzad tamas and a muedes in the same animal. Aval muad l'gamri. But if it would be a full muad, he wouldn't have the tamus at all. He doesn't hold like Rav Ada bar Ava. Rabbi Elazar says on top of Memvav Medalov, English Shmir al Saka. Rabbi Elazar says the only place there's no guarding except if it's dead. It means that you can't properly guard it. So Amarava, my time with Rabbi Eliezer. What's the reasoning for Rabbi Eliezer? It's based upon the fact that Pasuk says V'lo Yishmeranu. That you can't guard it means to say there's no way you could guard this animal. There's no way you could guard it. So it says the boar was uncovered. You think you can cover up a pit? Do you want to say you can't cover up a pit? But it says it says if you cover up the pit and then an animal falls into, you're exempt. So Abai says, what's the reason why Rabbi Eliezer says that you're not liable? Who says, what's the reason why Rabbi Eliezer says that you cannot properly guard the ox? What's the reasoning? Time the Rabbi Eliezer continue. Rabbi Nelson says, "Minayin shlo yigado adam kelav rabbi soch beiso, v'ayam et sulam ra'ua b'soch beiso, shenemer v'lo tasim damim b'veisecha." How do we know you can't put a dangerous dog in your house or a dangerous ladder in your house? Because it says, "Do not put any blood in your household." And from here we see that if it's dangerous, you can't keep it in your household. And that's what Rabbi Eliezer says. There's no alternative. This is the conclusion of that. We'll return to this chapter. God willing, we'll bring it up again in the coming years and days and weeks and months. Just going on. Anybody has any